My name is Gopi. I don't go into the details, but I represent Blinkist here, and my role is Director of Engineering. A short intro about Blinkist. If you have not already known about Blinkist, so Blinkist is an app where we produce insights out of nonfiction books, or recently we introduced also what we call a shortcast, which is again insights out of podcast. That fits our consumer learning pattern. So if you are a consumer who want to fit into your schedule, like how you're traveling in your tube and want to learn something as a development plan, then we provide this 15-minute insights. Or if you want to go deep dive, we also have audiobooks in our platform. That's basically the product that we are into. Yeah, when Gus and I discussed about this roundtable and what topic, so I was kind of going into the line of how to scale teams, because this is kind of my area of expertise, and talking about scaling your team, especially when you are in the growth phase. And Gus was talking about a lot of interest with people moving towards microservices, and I already saw a couple of them talking about microservices. So we wanted to find a natural blend, which was a little bit strange. So I took this acronym of Stranger Things, and also I'm a big fan of this series. Someone who has grown up in the 80s and 90s, inspired by science fiction. This was something I really enjoyed in the last few seasons. Hopefully, there is one more coming. Moving on to the topic. So what I want to briefly touch today is not going into the details of what is a microservice, how do you move, what are the different design patterns to move into this, for a couple of reasons. One, as I said, I want to show you some practical examples when and how we started to move towards this journey. And two, I don't also consider myself as specialized in microservices. There's tons and tons of material. Some of the code gurus you see here, Sam Newman, Martin Fowler, probably everyone knows about them. There's tons of books. They made tons of money writing about this, so I don't go into the details. Rather, what I want to talk is show you three patterns which I observed constantly, time and time again, with different teams that I have worked with, both as an internal in an organization, as startup, or as part of consultancy that I have done in my previous life. So switching on to the first pattern. So the first pattern is predominantly when you start your, let's say, a startup or a small, medium business. Usually your landscape is pretty small. You have an application architecture where the race doesn't need to be defined. It's very simple. You don't probably even think about design patterns and so on. To be really honest, when we did it, we never thought about it because we were more focused on the first 2 years where we went through this hyper growth phase. We wanted to scale, we want to bring new features, we want to make sure that people adopt and so on. So it's natural we don't think about of design patterns, software architecture, rather more focus into things how we can deliver fast and to making sure that we go to market with high quality and making sure that we are able to attract the customers. But over a time of period, let's say after the 2 years, you will see some patterns that will start to arrive. For example, in our case, we grow suddenly from a couple of engineers, maybe a handful of engineers, 6 or 7, into like 5 mission teams, which comes to like close to 40 to 50 engineers working on different products, different product missions. Missions are nothing but in our language, more or less in the Spotify equivalent is squads. All cross-functional teams trying to push in a lot of features, a lot of new things into our app. And then you realize this pattern where you see a lot of dependencies between these teams. And you also spot a lot of bugs that are coming primarily because of all these dependencies that we are creating. And it's really impacting, and this impact is hugely proportional to the size of the team. So as a team grow from 5 to 10 to 10 to 20 to 20 to 40, you see it's also kind of growing this. Yeah. One of the examples that I could give is we started to create at one point a serverless ETL pattern framework, which is a homegrown framework. We want to build what we called as our own ETL pipelines. As time this started to grow and grow and grow. New systems came in, and all of a sudden we ended up with like one big repo with like 40, 50 lambdas that is being deployed. There's a lot of dependencies. We never really adopted something like lambda layers and so on. So there was too many things happening, 6 or 7 engineers, right from data engineering to backend engineering, everybody trying to compete, trying to override things, a lot of chaos in there. At this point, which is when we realized, okay, there is a naturally, we need to build some kind of a guardrail. And this is where we said, like, if you adopt the microservices pattern, this guardrail automatically comes for us and gives us a safer approach to deploy, and there is low risk, and it can easily scale. So this is one of the patterns that we identified, which basically organically provided this kind of guardrail. It was not a discussion where we have to sit down, think about microservice and so on. It was just that we were pushed into a corner where we said, now is the time where we have to go through this journey, and we started learning about it, and we started breaking things. If you are a serverless fan like us, then you would probably know about if you're running your pipeline serverless way, then there is lambda layers that were recently below, how you can build this, how can you independently deploy, even if they are like 40, 50 lambdas orchestrated together and so on. So we went into from being a big monolith into a microservice architecture, even for ETL pipelines. So this is pattern one that I wanted to highlight first. The second pattern itself is coming from the growth of the teams, which is our data landscape. So at some point, we realized we were not, we started with one data store, which is our primary data store on MongoDB. And over time, we found out that there were small data stores that were clipping out when we started to build a lot of these integrations, a lot of internal teams trying to build and make sense of the data. And our landscape started to become on its own very complex. So there was a marketing team scaling on one side, and they had their own data coming in and creating a lot of dependencies, going back into the tracking events that is coming from products and somehow getting into to marketing on the same way. It's also from the CRM teams or the BI teams. So there is a lot of these teams generating their own product or consuming the data from the product teams, the product that generates. And at some point, it became really, really complex for us to manage this landscape. One pattern that we found out was what we call as the sandwich pattern. So on one hand, we had this product teams that is generating a lot of this data. And then there is consumers team, for example, marketing or CRM, which is using this data to build their own campaigns or to reach out to their end user customers. And then there is this in-between team, for example, data engineering or the backend teams, which is struggling between these two in terms of managing expectations, and especially when it comes to end-to-end accountability. We talked about this so many times because it led to a lot of data reliability problems. And at one point, we said, maybe it's time that we move into kind of a domain architecture where we provide end-to-end accountability and make sure that we have end-to-end tests there. People can take care of their own data domains. And this was another pattern where we said, okay, if you want to go into this domain architecture, the first thing we need to do is think about how to break them into microservices that can provide this end-to-end links or end-to-end chains of data movement. So this was the second pattern that helped us to move or to adopt into to the microservice architecture. Third one, obviously, again, coming with the people-oriented problem. So as we went into this phase with so many engineers, we also found that there were a lot of time waiting for decisions to be made because they were either depending on someone else who was touching one particular data store and had direct impact on another service using the same data store, and they had to wait for some decisions to be made, or the process of making those decisions even was too long because we have to involve 5 different teams, 10 different people together into a room, have a lot of these meetings. And being a small company as us, we wanted to make these decisions faster. We wanted to provide decision-making power to the engineers when it comes to technology. And at the same time, we want to provide a controlled autonomy for them. And this was one of the patterns that we adopted in terms of microservices that basically gave this autonomy to the engineers. For example, one instance that we could say is when we started, we had basically anyone here from the startup background knows probably there is only two teams, one focusing on one of the mobile platform, either it's iOS or Android, whichever your product is aimed for. And then the other one probably looking everything else in the company. So that's how our team also started. And over a period of 2 years that I mentioned, we became like a team of like 7 different platform-oriented teams. So Android team, iOS team, web team, backend team, DevOps team, infrastructure team, data team, BI team. So it's like so many teams that grew, and everyone had to touch something that was created as a monolith and had to depend on each other to make decisions. And by creating and moving into this microservice architecture, this really provided us with this autonomy that we were longing for to make those decisions faster. So this is the third pattern, which again, that's something that inspired us to move into this, and we were able to go into a phase where we could make a lot of decisions primarily based on out of the architecture that provided us organically. So these were the 3 patterns that we found in terms of people. So most of these patterns, as I said, is how we observe. We never had a situation where we have to go into a technology boardroom or bar room and talk about why we have to go into microservice architecture, or is this architecture suitable for us? How do we split and so on? It was most of the time for us the natural organic growth of the teams and pushed us into a corner where we had no choice but to adopt microservices, which was in turn also led us into these patterns that could help us to move forward. So that's my time. I'm happy that I was able to share and give some insights. Hopefully everybody have your own patterns that you see in your current role and with your current teams. And I'm happy to help you if you need any more help in this call, or also further if you want to have one-on-one chats with your team to help you towards this journey. I can also do the same. Thank you so much.